Our assignment for this week is to give an illustration of the course materials on constructive criticism. So particularly in a peer review academic setting. I'm going to go off a little bit on a tangent because I've had the opportunity to experience 9 months of critique in a writer's workshop, very personal writing, and so there's some great things that have come out of it that I think are important for people who are giving critique to know and for people who are receiving critique to know. Just to show you what I'm talking about. This is my box. You can see my writing box. This is 9 months of critique, including this stack that I've pulled out to use as some specific examples. We were in a 10-person writers group, and every week we featured 3 or 4 of the projects, and it was critique the entire time. Everything was read in advance. We printed out copies of each piece and wrote by hand. So we didn't use the fancy word markup, which actually I prefer the old-fashioned handwritten way. And every person at the end then received 9 or 10, depending on how many were in the group at any given time, critiques of their paper, after having spent 20 to 30 minutes hearing the critique without response. So it was an intense process, and had our instructor not been very talented and very experienced, and having been through a Master of Fine Arts program and understanding how that really works on an academic level, I think it would have been very difficult to receive the criticism and very difficult to give honest criticism. So here are a couple of things that I learned from that experience. The very first rule we were taught in giving critique is that it is always a privilege to read someone else's work. So especially if you're in a setting where it's an assignment, sometimes it can seem like a drudgery and like, oh my gosh, I've got to get through all this reading this week. However, it's your privilege. It's a privilege to be able to engage in the creative process of another person. Because as a writer, when you put yourself out there, particularly on something that's personal or something that you've worked really hard on, it is like bearing your soul, to be a little cliche. I say it's like, having to get undressed in front of the room. So it's a very nerve-wracking experience. And so recognizing, since we're all engaged in the process, that it's a privilege. It's a privilege to read anyone's work. So starting from the point of view that this is not drudgery, this is a privilege. Number 2, you always start with what you like. And even if you just have to be like, I like your effort, right? You always find something you like. And years ago, I learned the rule for compliments for every criticism. You can't necessarily do that when you're critiquing a paper, but again, leading with what do I like? And that's easy in the early days, but once you've been with the group a while, sometimes you just jump into the critique. So it's always good to at least mention 1 or 2 things that you like. So that's sort of the positive side of it. So when you move into the actual critique, which is not negative, in fact, it's the meat of it, then you want to think about being very specific in the criticism and looking at the different elements of the writing that you can analyze. And so for us, we were particularly looking at what is the structure of the piece, what is the language like, what is the flow, what does scene development look like, what does character development look like, even though this was nonfiction. So when you're looking at academic writing, you're going to be looking at different things, particularly what is the argument and do you prove the argument. However, for the purposes of the class, I did creative nonfiction essays. So a lot of what I was doing was basically presenting an argument and defending it. So some of the critiques that I got in that class I know are going to be useful here. But I just want to show you, like, here's one of my little papers, right? And so this is very sweet Melissa who critiqued me. And this is one of the nicest people you'll ever meet. But this is toward the end. And I'm going to hold it up. I don't know how well you can see it. But you can see she didn't have any problem tearing in there. And not only did she mark up every page, she put notes at the end. And so she starts with good, very strong opening. Then she goes to, these 2 are good, but maybe they need to be moved, right? Then she put another piece in. Start here, create more of a scene, describe the tears going down your cheeks, etc., etc. And then she crossed out and edited some of my work. I'm going to show you another one. Same piece, right? Again, this is from our instructor. Nice work, solid revision, good start out, resonant ending. You captured the conflict, right? Then she went through and hit me up on all kinds of flow. And then she had certain parts where she would say, for example, here, what prompted this? What's going on? Expand. So I think that the two types of critique that I found the most helpful, that would, again, in sort of finding language that worked, was either to tighten, right, which is your wordy, right, is to tighten, right, or to expand. So a lot of times we either need to blow it out or we need to pull it in. And then particularly look at the structure and the flow, and not only to say it doesn't flow, but to say why it doesn't flow. It feels like there's something missing here. Or, as was often the case, and I noticed this in giving critiques, this is a great paragraph, but it doesn't go here. It goes at the end. Or this is your introduction, this should be moved to the beginning. So that sort of feedback is very, very, very helpful. And I will say the quality of my writing in the last year has improved tremendously because I was able to open myself up to critique. But then also because I was critiquing other people's work, it really helped me to key into like what I liked, what worked in other writing that maybe I wasn't quite doing. And it's actually a way to learn what works. So those are my examples of constructive criticism. And thankfully, we don't have to go through that process of experiencing 2 hours of critique at a time. So I look forward to continuing. I'm sure there'll be other great critiques to come.